Hey guys, welcome back to DIY Projects with Pete. In today's episode, we're going to go over a little different topic than normal, but it's something I feel is really important to at least know how to do, whether you choose to or you don't, and that's how to change your own oil. Now, we're going to go over some of the tools and equipment you're going to need, and we'll talk about the process from buying your oil to changing your oil and the filter to returning that old oil. Hopefully this video gives you some ideas on the overall process, as well as some of the benefits of doing your own oil change, and helps you make that decision. Should you do your own oil change or shouldn't you? Now comment below. I'd love to hear, do you do your own oil change? Put yes. If you don't, put no. And are you thinking about it? Put maybe. Also, if you have any tips to share with other DIYers on how to make the process easier, we'd love to hear. All right, let's get started. With any oil change, you'll want to figure out the type and quantity of oil for your vehicle, and the owner's manual is going to give you the answers you need. You can also take a look under the hood, as the oil weight is typically printed on the cap. And of course, a quick Google search should give you the information you need. This video will show you the overall process of an oil change on our vehicle, but the same basic steps of draining the oil, changing the oil filter, and filling it back up with new oil can be applied to most vehicle types. But the oil cap, drain plug, and oil filter will be in different locations, so I always recommend watching a YouTube video of an oil change on your exact vehicle to make the process as efficient as possible for you. Even if you've done the change before, watching a video will be a quick refresher to remind you of the process and where everything is. It helped me quickly find the oil filter in my wife's Traverse, which is accessed from under the hood. Oil and filters can be purchased at many different stores, and I was at Home Depot getting some lumber, so I picked up an oil filter while I was there. I'll typically buy my oil at Costco since it's a good quality full synthetic oil, and it's the best price in our area at under $4 a quart. You get a total of 10 quarts in the box, but comment below and let me know where you get your oil. The total cost for oil and a filter came to about $44, and I'll have a couple extra quarts to use for the next change. You'll need to invest in jack stands, rubber gloves, a funnel, an oil filter wrench, socket wrench, wood blocks or wheel chocks, and an oil pan. A floor jack and or ramps are convenient to have, especially if you have a car with low clearance underneath or you just need a little extra room to work. I'll have links to the ramps and tools used, but most can be found at your local auto parts store, Harbor Freight, or Walmart. I did some calling around and checked with a couple oil change service centers where we live to see how much it costs for a full synthetic oil change on a Chevy Suburban. Most places came in around $111 to $131. Walmart was by far the lowest at $75. I haven't been to Walmart for an oil change, but let us know how your experience was if you have. In 2022, we had an oil change done on the Chevy Traverse, and they charged us $126 for an oil change. And that's without getting upsold on air filters, wipers, and additional work you may not necessarily need. This simple $105 oil change quickly escalated into a $222 bill when they suggested new filters and some other work needed to be done. If I get upsold too, I always decline everything and I take out the filter and clean it myself. One of the cool things about learning how to do an oil change is you can then service the rest of your vehicles and save both time and money. I serviced my Ford F-150, the Polaris Ranger, which is super easy to do and takes me about a half hour from start to finish, the old Bayliner boat, our Bobcat skid steer, mowers, and then everything else with a gas engine. It saves me the time of loading up the trailer, going to a dealership or to an oil change center, waiting or dropping it off, and then coming back home. Plus, it saves money, and even more if you catch a good sale. Start up your vehicle so the engine warms up and your oil flows out easier. Let the vehicle run a few minutes and then turn it off before doing the oil change for 5 to 10 minutes so the oil isn't too hot to work with. It's a good idea to put on some old work clothes. If you're working on a bigger truck, there's a good chance you'll have enough clearance to work underneath, so slide a piece of cardboard underneath and use some good jack stands for safety. Always make sure the parking brake is on so the vehicle doesn't roll. Now, I'm able to pretty easily get under this Suburban and our pickup without using a jack or ramps, but there's a good chance you'll need to for smaller cars and SUVs. If you're going to use a floor jack, the process is fairly similar. Pull the vehicle onto a level surface and set the parking brake as usual. I'll then block the tires to keep the truck in place. Wood blocks will, of course, do the job, and wheel chocks are even better if you have some. Find a jack point on your vehicle's frame to raise it up, and then place your jack stands underneath, under the frame as well for safety. You can then adjust your jack as needed so the vehicle rests firmly on the jack stands. Now, I only have the vehicle raised a couple inches in this example, but that still gives me quite a bit of extra room, and I'm able to get under the vehicle a lot easier. When you are finished, simply remove the jack stands and then the floor jack. My favorite method for getting additional clearance under a vehicle is to use ramps, and these are Rhino ramps I picked up a few years ago. They're super durable, and they're nice and light for carrying out to the truck. Figure out a level spot to set the ramps, and then place them immediately ahead of the front tires so you can slowly drive up the ramps. This goes without saying, but the vehicle should of course be off before you start your oil change. Pop the hood, grab a stool if you need to, and then look for your oil cap. It's a good idea to just wipe everything clean. You don't want any debris getting in your oil tank, so we'll wipe around our cap here. You can see our dipstick is located right here. The oil level on the dipstick looks good, but it has turned a dark brown color, and it's time to get some new oil in. The cap on this truck says SAE 0W-20 and that we should use an oil with the Dexos certification. Remove the oil cap so the oil will flow out easier once the drain plug is removed. Grab some rubber gloves, wrenches, or a breaker bar to fit your drain plug, and an oil filter wrench. Then slide your drain pan under where the drain plug is. Find your oil drain plug, and then you can adjust your catch pan as needed. Initially, it's going to come out at quite an angle, and then as it empties, you'll push it and it'll come straight out. I've found that Harbor Freight is the best place to get rubber gloves as they're good quality and priced right. Throw a 15mm socket on your socket wrench and turn counterclockwise. You could also use a wrench. And if your drain plug's real tight or you just want to make it easier on yourself, pick up a breaker bar for about $15 and turn it counterclockwise until it starts to loosen up. Adjust your drain pan as you need to. I like to have a rag handy, but go ahead and loosen it by hand. I like to put a little forward pressure on the threads here. And then when it gets toward the end, when you know it's ready to go, you can quick pull it. With the oil cap off and having warmed up the vehicle a few minutes and then letting it cool, the oil should flow out fairly quickly. I typically like to wait about 5 minutes or so until it's all drained out. And as you can see, a good-sized drain pan, some rubber gloves, cardboard, and a rag are good to have just in case you get any splatters or unwanted drips. Here I'm wiping off the oil filter. We'll change in a couple minutes so you can see where it's located on this vehicle, and it's definitely easy to access. Go ahead and inspect your bolt. Check that that seal or gasket is in good condition. It might be rubber built in just like this one, or you might have a metal crush washer. So if you need to replace those, go ahead and do that before putting it back in. Once it's hand tight and snug, just give it a quick turn with your socket and you're good to go. Your manual is also going to have a torque setting for tightening this bolt if you'd prefer to use that method. So grab your torque wrench and tighten it until you hear a click. Go ahead, adjust your oil catch pan to make sure that it's right underneath your oil filter. And there's a couple different types of wrenches you can use. You can use your standard wrench here. There are also strap wrenches, or there's these sort of socket wrenches. This is actually a really easy oil filter to get to. We'll start by showing you this method. This just clamps around here, and then we can undo it counterclockwise. And that would be easy that way. The other method is to use a little wrench like this, which works great as well. That just clamps around. This is the messiest part of the job, but as long as you have your catch pan ready, you should do just fine. And an oil filter installed vertically, without many obstructions below, makes less of a mess than the horizontal ones that can sometimes drip more on other parts of your vehicle. So just have a good rag handy. One really important step is to make sure that the oil filter's gasket came with it. Sometimes it can get stuck and stay up there, so make sure it's removed. Here's the oil filter I went with for the Suburban. This is Fram brand. And if you open it up, you can take a look at it. I like this style because it's got that rubberized bottom, which makes it easy to get a nice tight fit by hand. Before installing the new oil filter, you'll want to use your finger to wipe a thin layer of oil onto the gasket to help ensure it has a nice and tight seal once it's installed. And something I like to do is pre-fill the oil filter with new oil to help prime it. There's some debate about doing this, but it's something I've always done and what I do for all of our vehicles. But comment below and let me know if you do or don't pre-fill and why. Before installing the filter, I'll clean the remaining old oil and then thread the new filter on. Read the directions on the oil filter box for recommendations, as you don't want to tighten it too much, but with this brand, I'm able to get it snug and then plenty tight with my hand. All right, that's nice and snug. After a little cleaning, the oil catch and storage container are ready to either be stored or to take to an auto parts store to recycle the old oil. Before we fill the truck back up with oil, make sure to double check that your funnel is nice and clean so you don't get any contaminants in your engine. This vehicle takes a total of 8 quarts, and each of these containers has 5 quarts. So I'm starting by using the container that I used to pre-fill the filter, which will complete my first of 5 quarts. I'll put a mark on the second container so I know when to stop pouring after putting in the remaining 3 quarts. We'll check the oil level using the dipstick on the truck once it's off the ramps and more level on the concrete. But for now, put the oil cap back on before we start the engine. Now's a good time to inspect your other fluids as well, so top off fluids like your windshield wiper fluid or coolant if you need to. And now that the vehicle has fresh oil in it, we'll remove the jack stands and wheel chocks and then start up the engine. Listen to make sure your engine sounds normal like it usually does, and then take a look at the gauges inside. Oil pressure's looking good, and then this will climb as the vehicle warms up. Release the parking brake and slowly back the vehicle off the ramps and onto a level surface. Pull the dipstick and check the engine oil level. It should show full, as this one does, being close to the top dot. And if it indicates low, simply add a small amount of oil until it reads full. Reset your oil indicator according to your owner's manual or by watching a YouTube video on how to do it. And then it's a good idea to look under your vehicle to make sure the filter's on tight and there are no leaks. Next, write down the mileage of your vehicle so you have records of your oil change. I like to use these stickers I got on Amazon to help with that, and I put one on every vehicle, ATV, and mower I service. You might also have a logbook for documenting oil changes and work done to your vehicle. Now, something that helps me is to have a Google Keeps note where I can quickly access information on our vehicles from my phone in case I'm at the store and need to buy oil. The last part of any oil change is to dispose of the used oil properly. If you have an oil storage container, you can simply take that to the auto parts store, or you could pour the oil out from it or from your drain pan into an empty oil container and take that container to recycle. Use an old canvas or some cardboard to protect your vehicle from oil getting on the carpets, and then head over to your local auto parts store that recycles used oil. It's free to do at all the stores I've ever been to, and it only takes a couple minutes. It typically takes me around 40 minutes to an hour and a half to get an oil change locally with drive and waiting time. And when changing the oil myself, it'll take around a half hour to 45 minutes, and then I try to buy or dispose of oil when running other errands. The cost to go to a local shop where we live is in the $115 average range, depending on where you go. And the cost to do it yourself with the Suburban was around $45, not including your time. I personally like knowing the type of oil put in the vehicle, that the plug and filter were put on correctly, and being able to change the oil any time of the day, and the reward of doing it myself and knowing my vehicle just a little better. Plus, it saves some time and money. Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in and sticking around till the end. I really appreciate it. Hope you got some value out of this video, got some tips on how to do your own oil change, and that it helps you decide if you should do your own oil change or if you shouldn't. All right, take care and cheers from Montana.